And so, he said that, the hydrochloric acid, the thing in the chemical industry is that the solution is dilution. Once you speak to scientists and people that work in this industry, you get a sense that this is actually a unfortunately more frequent occurrence than we realize. And it's pretty well understood how to deal with it. And it was dealt with in a way that has historical precedent.
So you're telling me that the people of East Palestine don't need to worry about getting exotic liver cancers in 10 or 20 years?
I don't know how to answer that per se. I can tell you
if you were living in East Palestine, Ohio, would you be drinking bottled water?
I wouldn't be in East Palestine, that's for sure. I'd be away for a month.
No. But that's it. But that's a good question. Freebrook, if you were living in East Palestine, would you take your children out of East Palestine right now?
While this thing was burning, for sure, you don't want to breathe in hydrochloric acid gas.
Why did all the fish in the Ohio River die? And then there were reports that chickens were dying.
So let me just tell, I'm not going to, I can speculate, but let me just tell you guys. So there's a paper, and I'll send a link to the paper, and I'll send a link to a really good Substack on this topic, both of which I think are very neutral and unbiased and balanced on this. The paper describes that hydrochloric acid is about 27,000 parts per million when you burn this vinyl chloride off. Carbon dioxide is 58,000 parts per million. Carbon monoxide is 9,500 parts per million. Phosgene is only 40 parts per million, according to the paper. So, that dangerous part should very quickly dilute and not have a big toxic effect. That's what the paper describes. That's what chemical engineers understand will happen. I certainly think that the hydrochloric acid in the river could probably change the pH. That would be my speculation, and would very quickly kill a lot of animals because of the massive pH.
What about the chickens, though? What about the chickens?
Could have been the same hydrochloric acid, maybe the phosgene. Maybe the phosgene. I don't know. I'm just telling you guys what the scientists have told me about this. Yeah.
I'm just asking you, as a science person, when you read these explanations, what is your mental error bars that you put on this?
Yeah.
Are you like, this is probably 99% right, so if I was living there, I'd stay? Or would you say, the error bars here are like 50%, so I'm just going to skedaddle?
Yeah. Look, if the honest truth, if I'm living in a town and I see a billowing black smoke down the road from me of, a chemical release with chlorine in it, I'm out of there for sure. Right. 100%. It's not worth any risk.
And you wouldn't drink the tap water?
Not for a while. No, I'd want to get it tested for sure. I want to make sure that the phosgene concentration or the chlorine concentration isn't too high.
I respect your opinion. So if you wouldn't do it, I wouldn't do it. That's all I care about. That's
I think there's something bigger going on here, Chamath. I think what we're seeing is this represents the distrust in media and the emergence of...
And the government.
And the government.
Yeah.
And, the emergence of citizen journalism. I started searching for this and I thought, well, let me just go on Twitter. I start searching on Twitter. I see all the cover-ups. We were sharing some of the link emails. I think the default stance of Americans now is after COVID and other issues, which we don't have to get into every single one of them, but after COVID, some of the Twitter files, et cetera, now the default position of the public is I'm being lied to. They're trying to cover this stuff up. We need to get out there and document it ourselves. And so I went on TikTok and Twitter and I started doing searches for the train derailment. And there was a citizen journalist woman who was being harassed by the police and told to stop taking videos, yada, yada. And she was taking videos of the dead fish and going to the river. And then other people started doing it. And they were also on Twitter. And then this became like a thing. Hey, is this being covered up? I think ultimately this is a healthy thing that's happening now. People are burnt out by the media. They assume it's link baiting. They assume this is fake news or there's an agenda and they don't trust the government. So they're like, let's go figure out for ourselves what's actually going on there. And citizens went and started making TikToks, tweets and writing Substacks. It's a whole new stack of journalism that is now being codified. And we had it on the fringes with blogging 10, 20 years ago. But now it's become, I think, where a lot of Americans are by default saying, let me read the Substacks, TikToks, and Twitter before I trust the New York Times. And the delay makes people go even more crazy. Like this happened on the 3rd, and when did the New York Times first cover it, I wonder?
Did you guys see the lack of coverage on this entire mess with Glaxo and Zantac?
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah, 40 years they knew that there was cancer risk. By the way, sorry, before you say that, Chamath, I do want to say one thing. Vinyl chloride is a known carcinogen. So that is part of the underlying concern here, right? It is a known substance that when it's metabolized in your body, it causes these reactive compounds that can cause cancer.
Can I just summarize? Summarize as a layman what I just heard in this last segment? Number one, it was a enormous quantity of a carcinogen that causes cancer. Number 2, it was lit on fire to hopefully dilute it. Number 3, you would move out of East Palestine. And
to transform it. Yeah.
And number 4, you wouldn't drink the water until TBD amount of time.
Until tested. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, so this is like a pretty important thing that just happened then, is what I would say.
Right.
That'd be my summary.
I think this is right out of Atlas Shrugged, where if you've ever read that book that begins with like a train wreck that in that case, it kills a lot of people.
Yeah.
And the cause of the train wreck is really hard to figure out. But basically the problem is that powerful bureaucracies run everything where nobody is individually accountable for anything. And it feels the same here. Who's responsible for this train wreck? Is it the train company? Apparently Congress back in 2017 passed deregulation of safety standards around these train companies so that they didn't have to spend the money to upgrade the brakes that supposedly failed that caused it. A lot of money came from the industry to Congress, both parties. They flooded Congress with money to get that law changed. Is it the people who made this decision to do the controlled burn? Like, who made that decision? It's all so vague. Like, who's actually at fault here?
Can I?
Yeah.
Go ahead. I just want to ask you a question.
Just to finish the thought.
Yeah.
The media initially just seemed like they weren't very interested in this. And again, the mainstream media is another elite bureaucracy. It just feels like all these elite bureaucracies kind of work together and they don't really want to talk about things unless it benefits their agenda.
That's a wonderful term. You fucking nailed it. That is great. Elite bureaucracy. That's perfect.
And they are. So the only things they want to talk about are things, that benefit their agenda. Look, if Greta Thunberg was speaking in East Palestine, Ohio about a 0.01% change in global warming that was going to happen in 10 years, it would have gotten more press coverage than this derailment, at least in the early days of it. Well, and again, I would just go back to who benefits from this coverage? Nobody that the mainstream media cares about.
I think, let me ask you two questions. I'll ask one question and then I'll make a point. I guess the question is, why do we always feel like we need to find someone to blame when bad things happen?
There's a train derailment.
I get it, but hang on one second.
Okay.
Is it always the case that there is a bureaucracy or an individual that is to blame, and then we argue for more regulation to resolve that problem? And then when things are overregulated, we say things are overregulated and we can't get things done. And we have ourselves, even on this podcast, argued both sides of that coin. Some things are too regulated, like the nuclear fission industry, and we can't build nuclear power plants. Some things are underregulated when bad things happen. And the reality is all of the economy, all